Here goes take 4. Okay, I want to dedicate this video to my husband, my sister, Michelle, and my adopted brother, Steven, for seeing me at my worst, for pushing me to get back out there and encouraging me that I needed to share what's been going on in my life, no matter how dark it's been, because people will love me and support me anyway and be able to relate to me more because of my honesty. So here goes. You guys may have noticed, those of you who have watched my channel for a while, that I have been absent when it comes to creating my own content. I used to post my own content on Fridays or Saturdays. I would create my own content and post those videos on Saturdays, but I don't think I've posted anything since November of 2021. The reason why is that beginning in September of last year, I have been going through a major personal transformation. What I would honestly refer to as a dark night of the soul. Things got darker for me at times than I thought was possible for me at this point in my journey. I tried to come on here and because I wanted to be honest about what was going on, and I just was not in the headspace to be able to do it, but I think I'm finally at that point. So let's go back to when I was 29. When I was 29 years old, I went through a major spiritual awakening. You guys, I've told the story many times. I discovered near-death experiences. I realized that many other people had similar experiences to me, and that the message that was being communicated about the simple message of love is exactly what I had always known was the truth, but didn't feel that I could accept. So at the age of 29, right before I turned 30, I fully accepted what I had always known, what I had always wanted to accept, that love is what matters. And I threw off the religious shackles that had been holding me down, and I sort of rose up into this blissful state. In 2018, the year that I turned 32, so I guess about 2.5 years later, I noticed some anxiety beginning to creep back in. But generally speaking, I was okay. I mean, I was growing spiritually. I was diving deeper into my spiritual practices. And last year I released my See the Creator course, and I don't think I've ever felt more free and more blissful and more connected than I did when I created and released that course. So, needless to say, I was very shocked, and it completely blindsided me when in September of last year, at the age of now 35, I got hit with anxiety and panic. Looking back on it now, I understand what happened. During the time, I had no idea. I felt completely out of control, and I very quickly got sucked into a cycle of fear, guilt, and judgment towards myself that I couldn't break free from. Now I understand that I am suffering from classic religious trauma syndrome symptoms. I am embarking on phase 2 of my journey of healing from religious trauma syndrome. So for anybody familiar with religious trauma syndrome, there's 2 phases. The first one is the trauma that you actually receive when you're in the religion, and the second phase is the leaving of the religion. There are other things going on in my life as well. I have chronic health issues that I have been trying to get help for unsuccessfully for the last several years, and these symptoms have been snowballing, and fall of last year really started interfering with my life. And so that was causing me some anxiety. At the same time, I switched from working outside the home to working full-time from home, doing YouTube, which is my absolute passion, and I had worked so hard to build this channel over the last couple of years. Also connected to my YouTube channel, as anybody who's watched me for any length of time knows, I shared my entire deconstruction journey publicly, and I came out publicly talking about controversial things with relation to the Christian faith, and most of my family and friends are still Christian. So the last 2 years was absolutely devastating to my personal life. It was one loss after another in my relationships, incredible amounts of drama, having people that I always thought would be there for me not able to talk to me because they're so disappointed in me, loss of respect in a lot of relationships, and only having a couple of people in my personal circle, I mean less than I can count on one hand, who actually support what I'm doing. I handled all of this very well during the time that it was happening, because I was growing spiritually. But what ended up happening is that in August of last year, my best friend left, and she was the only friend that I had left. She was really my one grounding relationship that was actually present here with me outside of my husband. And when she left, the emotional loss and the isolation of the last 2 years of public deconstruction just sort of fell in on me and hit me all at once. And what I didn't understand at the time is that I was coming up against my subconscious programs, things that I no longer consciously believe, but fears that had been instilled into me as a child, that if you step out of line, there's gonna be consequences. So here I am, I've become successful publicly doing something that almost nobody approves of. And my subconscious mind is going crazy saying, okay, what bad thing is gonna happen? What if I'm really not okay? And I wanna talk about this really openly and honestly because I know I'm not alone, and I know many people are struggling with the same issues. And I just want to be real with you and say, hey, I dealt with this too. And it really dragged me into one of the darkest places that I have ever been in. What I did is I went to see my therapist, and she wanted to do EMDR, which has been extremely helpful for me in the past. But in this case, it was not helpful, and it made the problem worse. Because in EMDR, what happened as I explored those feelings of panic is that it began bringing up all kinds of stuff that I had completely buried from my childhood, that I had completely forgotten, where I had felt panic. I felt a lot of fear and a lot of panic after coming into this body. I'm not necessarily saying that was a bad thing, because clearly I needed to deal with it at some point, but my therapist wasn't helping me with it. It was just making me worse, and she sort of seemed to be stumped with me. She didn't understand why I wasn't getting better. So what happened is that I kept getting worse. The EMDR was making it worse. I had no idea what was going on with me. I felt completely out of control, and here I am. I don't like to use the term spiritual teacher, but realistically, I'm teaching people spiritually. I'm helping people spiritually. Like I said, I put out that class, See the Creator, to help people grow spiritually. And now I'm having panic attacks. I'm beginning to feel like a complete fraud because I've shared my story publicly of how I got free of anxiety and depression, and now I'm dealing with worse anxiety than I have since I was a kid, and I have no idea what to do about it because everything that I was doing before not working. My spiritual practice is not working. I couldn't meditate because I would sit down to meditate and I would just be engulfed in the fear. And so what happened is that depression began to set back in, because I felt like a complete failure and a complete fraud. And this spiritual ego, as much as I'd like to say I don't have one, my spiritual ego is going full force. Like, you are not as spiritually evolved as you thought. You have no business trying to teach or help anybody else. And at that point, I became really afraid that I was going to lose everything I've built on this channel. I'm going to lose my passion. I'm going to lose what I've worked so hard for. And so I'm imagining worst case scenario at this point. I am depressed. I'm waking up in the morning and having panic attacks trying to get out of bed. I cannot remember another time in my adult life when it was as bad as it was for me back in about November of 2021. People talk about I'm just trying to get through the day as a figure of speech. I was trying to get through the day. It was minute by minute by minute. trying not to panic about what is wrong with me, why is this happening. My husband had to stay home from work. I'm so thankful for him. He worked from home for 2 weeks to take care of me and the kids because I couldn't function. It was my judgment of myself for being somehow less spiritual because I was dealing with these dark, heavy emotions that kept me trapped in that cycle. It's like I knew all this stuff, but I couldn't do it because the emotion was too big and too scary. And every time I tried to surrender to it, I felt like I'm going to lose control. It's going to completely take over. I'm going to have a panic attack and end up in the hospital and go crazy and end up in the psych ward. And that's honest to God what it felt like. And this is why I say, if you need help, please get help. Okay, here I am on YouTube doing spiritual teaching. But I needed help because I encountered something in my life that I could not handle on my own. I didn't have the skills. I understood intellectually how to do it, but I needed somebody. I had experienced so much loss in my life. I felt very alone. I felt very overwhelmed, and I needed to get help. And I got a good cognitive therapist. And that provided the feeling of safety that I needed to be able to relax. And from that point on, I have been able to sit with those extremely overpowering emotions of fear. So every time they start to come back up, I will go sit in my room for 5 minutes. I'm going to tell you exactly how I do this for anybody who needs to hear this. I sit with it. I welcome it in. I say, what are you trying to tell me? What do you need me to hear? And it will start telling me. It will start coming right up. And then I go journal about it. And I write it down. I'm afraid because of this. I'm feeling anxious because of this. And then I tell myself, like it was a little scared child, this part of myself, it is okay to be afraid of that. And this is how it starts to release. And every time that you can do that, you become a little bit less afraid of it because you see, I faced my fear, I sat with it, and it was okay. Not only did it not come in and take over, but it calmed down because it felt heard, because I brought it into the light. And so that's the process that I'm going through right now. And I know for a lot of you, this is not like earth-bending news. Like we all know in the spiritual community, most of us know anyway, that to heal those broken parts of us, we have to bring them into the light. But knowing it and actually experiencing it and doing it can be two very different things, especially when it comes to ourselves, because it's so easy to judge ourselves and to hold ourselves to an impossible standard, to say, I should never feel alone. I should never feel afraid. I should never feel anxious because that makes me unspiritual. That makes me unfit to help or teach anyone else. No, it doesn't. One thing that I have found incredibly inspiring, because I interview near-death experiencers and I study near-death experiences, they have a slightly different take on the purpose of this physical life than a lot of spiritual teachers do. So a lot of spiritual teachings that are popular right now will almost make it sound like the dark things, the negative things that we experience are something to be overcome. Like, yeah, we overcome them by loving them, but they're still like a negative, right? Near-death experiencers don't tend to see things this way. They tend to see the whole human experience as a beautiful gift. And specifically, when I did my fireside chats, I asked one of my groups this question: what is the purpose of life on earth? And every single one of them, I remember Jeff Olson, he said the purpose of life on earth is to be happy, to be sad, to be angry, right? To have all these emotions and to enjoy and be in this entire experience. So feeling separate, feeling afraid, feeling sad, feeling angry, feeling alone, feeling anxious, feeling depressed, all of this is part of the human experience, and you can't have it anywhere else. We come here to experience this, Yes, to integrate it and grow through it, because nobody wants to be depressed or afraid forever, right? Nobody wants to live in that state. But it's okay. The only way you get through these emotions is to be in them, to let them be what they are without judgment, and to see it as a blessed experience. One thing that I've always had since I was a little child is that I desperately loved God. My entire life has been about trying to find that connection with the divine. This is why at the age of 19, I left my restrictive childhood church and began attending a charismatic church, because of one of the primary reasons was the freedom of expression in worship, because I wanted to express my love to the divine. And one thing that I have learned since leaving the church, one thing that I've learned as I've dug deeper into my own spiritual practices, particularly in understanding that everything that is happening is a part of God. Everything that exists is part of God. So I don't have to go to a church building to worship God, although that can be a very beautiful expression. It's not necessary, because I can love God. I can express my love for the divine by loving my friend, my child, my husband, my cat, by loving the bird that's outside the window, by loving my camera that I'm filming on, by loving the mess that my room is, by loving literally anything and everything. I'm loving God. And this knowledge brought me to a new level of bliss in my life when I discovered it, before all of this happened. But one thing that I had not at the time fully learned to love is the depths within myself, the things within myself that I was afraid of, things that had been buried there since childhood, the terror that I had coming into this world, the fears of being stuck in my body, the social anxiety, the awkwardness, the fear of getting it wrong, feeling like I have to stay in the lines, all of these things that were buried deep in my subconscious that I had never dealt with. And what I have had to learn, and am in the process of learning through all of this, is once again that the answer is love. It is all about love. The fear begins to dissolve, not when you try to pretend it's not there, not when you run from it, not when you hide from it, but when you put it in the passenger seat of your car and say, it is okay for you to be here. I love you for what you are and what you're expressing to me. Come along with me, and we're going to live our life with courage. It is okay if you're here. I'm going to bring you with me, and we're going to be brave, and we are going to do this thing that we're called to do. We're going to live this beautiful life that we've been given, and we're going to do it afraid. We're going to do it anxious. We're going to do it depressed, but we are going to do it, and we are going to love it, and we are going to love every aspect of this beautiful expression of the divine that we are surrounded in and that we are. Be loved, be happy, be at peace, and thank you for watching.